Hey everyone, welcome back to the Meme Team podcast, where we talk about the logic behind virality, because marketing isn't just logic, it's culture, and our podcast decodes both. We're welcoming this week Mark Stenberg, Adweek's senior media reporter covering the business of digital and print media and publishers. Welcome, Mark.
Yeah, Sonia, thanks for having me. Happy to be here.
Yeah, definitely. So we're just going to chat a little bit about ChatGPT's new chat feature that they've launched in Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, and Taiwan. Basically, it allows you to create a group chat for like 20 users, and then you all kind of just start chatting. And I think it's a little bit funny because, like it's a new way, I think, for them to start gathering information on how people kind of chat amongst themselves. But I also think it's a little weird to kind of just like launch it without a specific use case, because people are just, I think it's going to take people a little bit more to figure out what they actually want to use it for. So a suggestion, when they see somebody's planning a group like trip, hey, why don't you bring everybody onto the chat so we can figure out what people want to do, voting. I don't know if you've ever been on a group chat when you have to like plan a trip, but it gets very messy very quickly as like people, are trying to like give ideas and then figure out what you actually want to do and what you don't want to do. So that would be, an idea there. But yeah, I'll be curious to see what people, actually use it for. Have you seen this, Mark?
I've seen sort of the press about it. I've not seen, I certainly don't know anyone using it. I don't have that many friends in the countries where it's available at the moment, but I'm trying to put myself in the mindset of like, could I see myself using that in whatever specific use case with my group chats? And like, honestly, I did just like plan a trip recently with some friends. We were like using Airbnb, and it's constantly like, okay, here are our options. And then somebody's like copy and pasting like 4 Airbnbs into the group chat. And everyone's kind of like, I like the first one. I like the third one. I like the one with the jacuzzi. And you're and I do think that like being able to just have like an assistant kind of keeping tabs of that and like making those remarks more intelligible and like not making you leave the interface again and again actually could be pretty useful. I just think like, I feel like for the vast majority of just like standard conversation, I wouldn't want AI involved in that. And I don't think my friends would want that's also like a weird thing of like, I don't want to say like consent because that feels like a little bit like extra, but like, do you ask everyone like, okay, are we comfortable like having this conversation in the presence of an agent kind of thing? Or like, do you just, I'm curious about the sort of social decorum of like when you let the snake into the garden and like, do you have to get everyone's approval first?
I assume ChatGPT does that when you first sign up to like chat, but I think it's going to be another one of those things like Apple, you don't even know what you're signing and it just goes, forward from there. I think I just want to keep it, separate, but maybe you just do figuring out the logistics in order to have it, keep tabs of like who voted for what, maybe even the whole like check splitting, which is always, difficult to manage, and just going from there. But otherwise, yeah, I just don't see people wanting to voluntarily have ChatGPT in there listening to what they say. I mean, we've heard recently of a lot of group chats that have said inappropriate things within them. So this is probably going to be a huge thing going forward.
I guess I go like the more that I think about it though, the more I a little bit get sold on it, because like the idea of like AI enabled browsers is that like not so much that people have been clamoring for AI enabled browsers, but like it could bring into one space a host of different activities that you're already doing across like disparate fields. And I can see myself specifically being a bigger fan of this if I was using it like on desktop and I was like chatting and I didn't have to like leave the chat window to Google something. If I could just like ask that in the window, everybody could see the answer. Then you could share like what restaurant you're going to and like the map would just populate. Like having a search, having a conversation in a channel that allows you to conduct all of the like extraneous searching that you would normally do to facilitate a conversation, having that all be able to occur within one space. I could see that actually being pretty useful. I just am like, for my casual conversations, which are just like your constant group chats, it would feel a little bit extra. But then I guess after a while, you would maybe start to depend on it and be like, oh, it's such a pain to leave to have to go use Google when I should just be able to
Hmm.
search in the chat. You know, so I could actually see this like growing on me just as a real convenience factor, more so than like this is reinventing the wheel. It's like, oh, you can just perform all the functions you would normally do, but without leaving one window. That could be
Yeah.
nice.
Yeah, yeah. Well, one thing that reminds me of is like, you know how there's usually a couple like laggards that like didn't pay attention to the whole conversation, then they just kind of jump in last minute. It's like,
Yeah.
wait, where are we going? Then it's like ChatGPT can very easily say, hey, this is where everybody's meeting, instead of somebody else having to be on top of the conversation and having to keep track of all that for everybody else in the group. So that would be a
Yeah.
huge boon for like the main like event planner, having like somebody, having ChatGPT being able to jump into those conversations and not have to worry if, everybody paid attention to the right, thread.
Yeah. Just, I mean, I think there's like a WhatsApp commercial where that's even like the premise of it right now. I don't know if you've seen, literally when
Oh,
I like
yes, you're
think
right. You're right. I
with the
saw that
two
recently.
atoms, I'm
Hmm,
sorry for
hmm,
knowing
hmm.
this,
No,
but
no,
yeah.
no. You
Um,
watch TV with commercials?
yeah. Um, I work at Adweek, so I should not feel self-conscious about being familiar with ads, but to this day,
No,
I'm
for
always
sure.
like, sorry for knowing about ads. Um, but I think actually, literally, it's funny that I mentioned that because when I think of this product, I don't think of it. I think of it drawing inspiration from WhatsApp more so than I
Mm,
see it competing with iMessage. Because I do
okay.
think WhatsApp has a lot more functionality within it. And there was just a story the other day that's like WhatsApp usage in the US has grown by like 39% kind of thing. So
Interesting.
um, I
Probably that's
do
another reason why they only launched it in, Japan, New Zealand, South Korea, and Taiwan, because they're probably heavy WhatsApp users. So I think you're right. They probably are competing more with WhatsApp than iMessage. So super, super interesting because, yeah, Americans don't really use WhatsApp.
right. I feel like it's the byproduct of this like monopoly that Apple has on like American users, where like
Hmm.
our iMessage functionality is actually like woefully behind what
Hmm.
WhatsApp users have.
Right.
Um, and I think ChatGPT, WhatsApp is obviously trying to close that gap, but I think ChatGPT
Right.
can just kind of like front run that whole situation by being like, we will provide you with an enhanced level of functionality, and we're not even going to get into the iMessage versus WhatsApp turf wars.
Hmm.
We're just going to present it as this entirely new mode of conversation and sort of like steal WhatsApp's thunder a little bit, which would
Yeah.
be an interesting move.
Which makes sense because it does seem as if they're trying to compete more with social media apps, Facebook, Twitter. Well, maybe not Twitter, but Facebook for sure. So this is another way that they're encroaching in their space. Well,
Hmm.
good luck to them. We'll see how it goes, but I think it'll take a little bit more for me to actually jump on there and use it myself. Awesome. So let's jump into the topics for this week. We've talked about him before, but I really want to talk about Timothée Chalamet again because he's really out there doing the most marketing for the promotional tour of Marty Supreme. I don't know if everybody saw, but he just dropped the 18-minute Zoom meeting with A24's marketing team where he pitches increasingly unhinged ideas to promote the movie Marty Supreme, painting the Statue of Liberty orange, dropping ping pong balls, the blimp, really honing in on the orange color. um, and it's satirical, yes, but it's also played very deadpan. So I think it's like hewing the line between is this real or is it not? And one of the things that actually surprised me was seeing that some of the ideas are actually coming out. He was photographed this week with the Wheaties package of like Marty Supreme on the box. And then yesterday, the blimp was seen flying around New York and LA. Um, so I was like super surprised because I thought it was just like the whole point was just the marketing happening within the Zoom call, and not the ideas actually appearing in real life. So I think it's a brilliant way of using both his stardom and being of like the YouTube generation of being able to, get on camera in a different way than actually being like, a movie star, which obviously he's very good at that as well. But this is a different type of being in front of the camera, right? And I really want to give props to the team that was on the Zoom call because most of them kept a straight face throughout. I don't know that I would have been able to do that. He's literally mocking the promotional cycle while he's doing the promotion. And the whole aspect of being self-referential is acknowledging the artifice of marketing itself, showing that he knows that his target customer is marketing literate and wants that sort of targeting to happen to them. The big thing too is I think it's also giving a lot of credit to like all the marketing that actually goes, or that's actually going behind the scenes for all these movies that come out. It's the first time that I've seen like a movie star, aside from Tom Cruise, who also does this very well, using his stardom to try to get marketing to happen in different formats and different channels, and not just the regular like teaser, trailer, movie premiere, and some like big interviews that happen like on TV. He's done the teaser trailer with like him, inside like the box with the ping pongs flying around, and then the guys wearing, the ping pong head. He did the Regal Cinemas um a movie. He invited people through his Instagram for that, so he knows that like experiential marketing is like super in right now. And then he was seen with the little Hermes Kelly bag that's orange, and he's just been doing all these like different things in order to promote the movie, which it's an A24 movie, an indie movie that's like going to be really small. So just the fact that he's doing all of this to promote it, hopefully means that it's going to convert to actual people going to see the movie.
Yeah.
Yeah. So have you seen the
Yeah.
18-minute Zoom?
So, I mean, I maybe I speak for some of our listeners here when I say that the boundary between like satire and reality, not to get too meta about it, is pretty blurry nowadays. To put it succinctly, I didn't know that that was a marketing stunt until like yesterday.
Oh,
You know what I mean?
oh,
Like
really?
I thought that was real, and I thought it was
Oh,
like,
how
and my
funny.
my like reporter brain immediately went to like, who would benefit from leaking this? Like, what's the
Yeah,
purpose
yeah,
of A24 looks bad, and well, I don't know why Timothée Chalamet would leak it to make A24 mad, or so I was like, why would they leak? And then to find out it was satirical, and then I think the same thing with the blimp. I thought that that was like a hoax or like
Old
a
White House,
fiction,
sure.
and then I
Yeah,
found out
yeah,
it was actually happening. So I think that like on some level, it definitely speaks to this like the internet moment that we're in now, where like it's sort of conspiracy theory coded. Like there's this like, is this real? Is this fake? Is this marketing? Is this a leak? And I think it's
yeah. Hmm.
brilliant. I think they're probably preaching to the choir. I'm a big Timmy fan. It sounds like you're a big Timmy fan. So
Yeah.
I'm just like absolutely eating it up. But I have seen it. I do wonder, I'd love to get your thoughts on this. Like, well, you were saying this is obviously an A24 film. So
Hmm.
they were indie. I don't know if like they continue to like, I know they have aspirations of becoming
Yeah,
a
so
major.
I think this is part of the change, right? So
Yeah,
up until I think the last 2 years, they have been like an indie studio, and they are slowly making their way into being like a bigger, name brand studio to try to compete
exactly.
against WB and Paramount and all that. Obviously, they're still like trying to do that. But that's what I think makes this so unique, because I don't think that there's another studio that would have done this, that
Yeah.
would take this chance on doing this. And I think the fact that they're trusting him
Hmm.
to, not only like I don't know which of the ideas are actually his, right? Versus like which ones he's actually getting pitched on. But it does seem as he's very involved in the whole, ideation, and then, actually, doing the video and the stunts themselves. But the fact that they are, using his stardom to also try to grow their own brand, I think is super smart, because it's like helping them both rise at the same time. um yeah. And then just to kind of add on what you were saying about not knowing whether it was like real or not, I think that that's the whole idea of things being memeable and being able to be,
Mm-hmm.
converted into like inside jokes.
Mm-hmm.
We've seen this work before, with Taylor Swift and her Easter eggs, right? Like, I think this
Mm.
is his mode of dropping these little Easter eggs for his fans, having his fans kind of jump on board and try to like decimate the entire like message, and then dropping other little hints with like the blimp and like the Wheaties, to then get more attention, which then raises the profile of the movie, but then also him, A24, and then just cause more attention, because now we have, news outlets wanting to cover the whole thing, questioning whether it's it's an absurdist take on like something real, or if it's just pure, purely a farce.
Yeah, I mean, I think my question is this still like an indie marketing campaign? I think the sort of methodology of it is definitely very off the wall and sort of
Hmm.
auteur-esque. And so I think that very much aligns with like the A24 brand and of course Timmy's brand. But what I'm getting at is like, who is the audience for these stunts? Is this, because I feel like it's playing to me and it's playing to you. Presumably it's playing to like cinephile, right? Like it's like, I wonder if this is going to get
Hmm.
like butts in the seats in the same way that like you would want for like a Jurassic Park, like a traditional blockbuster, like an
Hmm.
Avengers type film? Or is this meant
Yeah,
to
so I
like,
don't think
is this
they're
speaking to
aspiring
like,
for that.
yeah. Although, like, I mean, I agree, right? Like, because these are kind of like gimmicky, cerebral
Hmm.
marketing ploys. So I feel like it's meant to like
Hmm.
really whip up the A24 base into attending. But I'm like, I do wonder if they're, to me, this reminds me of like the era of like Leonardo DiCaprio where he was doing like Catch Me If You Can kind of film. It's like a
Mm,
fun, one-off original premise with this hot young actor. I don't know what the marketing looked like for that, but that was a pretty generally appealing film. That was the kind of thing that like the average moviegoer would enjoy. And I get the sense
right.
that Marty Supreme could be that kind of film, but this marketing strategy to me is more laser focused on like a sort of letterboxed using Regal AMC membership type film goer rather than like your average Joe Schmo who goes to like 2 movies a year.
Yeah, I think that's the thing, right? So coming up at the end of the year, we have Wicked, For No Good, as well as Avatar. So those are already going to be like the two films that the majority of people
Mm,
are going to go see, right? Timothy A24, they have to know this, right? So it's just like, what can
mm,
we do to just get more attention? And I think what they're trying to do is instead of come see the movie because it's like, a really good indie film about, a ping pong player who like achieves his dream against all odds, they're going for like come because it's like the memeable movie that you want to participate in and then like be part of the story and experience it with all these other people that are also here on the joke and like paying attention. And I think that that's like a winning strategy because how else would they get attention?
mm.
And that's what I think is like playing very smartly into this because they're using his, brand. The fact that he's like super enmeshed in like New York culture, super young, and like the YouTube generation that knows how these things play, that knows memes and
Hmm.
like wants to create them and then get people to experience it in that way is the whole point of this like marketing campaign. Whether it's
I
going to work
see.
or not is going to be like really hard because, the movie's coming out on Christmas Day. um, it's already gonna be tough going up against, these other like tentpole films, but they had to do something. And so the fact that like he is trying to like do something is such a like smart move, I think, on my part. It's also gonna work into his ploy to run an Oscar campaign for this
Mhm.
movie. He's already getting really good reviews from like the people that have already seen it and from critics and all that who, need that. But now he kind of wants to build a groundswell movement to get people to support him as he, does this bid like he did last year. So I think it's like working twofold for him as well.
That's a good point. Like, and we talked about this a little bit. Like, I know in like business you would call this like the key man problem or whatever. Like, they're very much capitalizing on the fact that Timothy is in this like generational run right now.
Hmm.
He's dating like one of the most famous women in the world. He's
Hmm.
coming off all of these amazing films.
He
He's
might
like,
not be dating her anymore
oh, maybe they
either.
broke.
But
That's
yeah,
right.
that's
He's
part of
got
the part
this.
of the
He's
thing is
channeling
that
his energy into this.
are they or aren't they?
No, I'm finding this. I'm finding this out in real time.
You must be
Um,
devastated.
yeah, I'm not a fan anymore. No, but he's like courtside at all the Knicks
Hmm.
games. Like
Hmm.
he's become this larger than life character,
Hmm.
and they're capitalizing on that, like
Right.
as they should. But to your point, this is very much like a star-driven marketing campaign, and that has the double benefit of obviously promoting the movie, but
Yeah.
really also expanding Timothy's presence in the limelight, which
Hmm.
theoretically would translate favorably to awards buzz down the line. I think it's a brilliant strategy. And you bring up this point of like making memeable moments to promote
Hmm.
a movie. And you're right, we have seen that a lot more over the last year and a half, I guess, almost starting with like Barbenheimer or whatever, but that we've seen
Mhm.
other moments of that recently where you're creating, I feel like marketing for films used to just be, it was like offshoots of
Mhm.
the IP itself, whereas like these marketing campaigns, the orange ping pong ball heads
Mhm.
kind of thing, like they're obviously tied back to the original film, but I think of them almost like, I mean, you're saying memes, that's the best word for it, but they're almost like inside jokes in a way. It's
Right.
kind of like you're creating something that like, what will get people to the theater? Oh, what if they all dress up in costume? Or like, what will get people?
I mean,
And
we
it's
saw
like,
that with the Minions movie. Young people would go to the movie
yeah,
dressed up in suits, right? And then for Barbie, you went dressed up in pink. So it becomes more about the experience itself,
hmm,
and what people are going to do, right? And I think that that's part of what he's, counting on here and trying to create that is like, how do we get people to think of it more as an experience versus like,
yeah.
hey, you're just going to go to the movies, on this
Yeah,
day
or
to
like
like watch
we
this.
saw the thing with Begonia recently, where it's like if you shave your head, you get in for
Right.
free, kind of thing.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
they are,
Yeah,
I
so we're
guess,
seeing more of those
yeah.
experiences being created. Yeah, the shaved of the head, we talked about that here, and then there was the long walk that did, you had to be on the treadmill for the whole the whole
Oh,
movie, or you got like booted from the experience.
that's
So
funny.
yeah, I wonder if they'll create something for that. I'm sure, right?
I think it's interesting because you can't be like, I guess with the begonia thing, that was kind of like a prank. So it was somewhat prescriptive. Come, we'll shave your head.
Mhm.
But like, they can't be like, everybody should wear a ping pong ball costume, because it's like you can't
Mhm.
tell people what to do. You just have
Right,
to like
exactly.
seed them with these ideas and see what catches. And I think that that's a little bit of what we've seen with this campaign. It's like you can't be prescriptive about how what do you call it? Like, you can't astroturf genuine interest. You can't astroturf
Right.
a meme, right? Like, it has to
Right.
come from the ground up, kind of thing. But you can give people ideas and like templates to work from. And I think that they're doing that with like the ping pong ball aesthetic and the Wheaties box aesthetic, which is
Mhm.
like both retro and obviously a tie into the movie. Kudos to the team for saying like, we're going to give people the tools to create memes themselves, and hope
Mhm.
that sort of one of these catches.
Yeah. Well, cool. So I guess the lesson here is that I think movie promo tours have changed. It's no longer enough to just show up on the red carpet and have that be the way that you're promoting it. We saw recently that Leonardo DiCaprio showed up on the New Heights podcast with Travis and Jason Kelsey, which he had never done before. I'm expecting Timothée Chalamet to also try to appear on the podcast, just to try to get some of those sports fans to show up for the movie, for the movie. But I think it's just going to require a lot more from both, the movie studios. It's not even about the money, though, of course, obviously the blimp costs money. But just coming up with new creative ways to market a movie using the star power of, the actors, and getting them to, do these like absurd stunts in order to get like more attention for the movie. Also, distribution is part of the content now, where it's like Timothée Chalamet dropping, the Zoom call by like the file name gives you this curiosity to see like what it is, using that absurdness of like whether it's real or not, and making people question and having to, dig deeper. As we talked about, like Easter eggs are really popular right now because it gets people to participate more than they would if you had just made it very obvious what it is that you're doing. That confusion causes engagement and it gets people to talk about it, which is kind of the whole point of trying to promote your movie.
Yeah, 100%.
Awesome.
Okay, my first topic was basically the acrimonious split between Steph Curry and Under Armour, who had a brand partnership deal that ran for about 12 years, from 2013 until just last week, when the two of them decided to part ways. It's a really interesting story in the sports world, where obviously professional athletes, specifically professional basketball players, dream of getting a signature shoe. That's like a really big deal. A Pistons player just got his first signature shoe this week, and it's been like a big announcement. That's sort of like tier one. The real like Mount Olympus tier are the people like the Jordans and the Currys and the LeBrons, where you get like not just your own shoe, but your own shoe brand. And so Steph was able to get that from Under Armour in 2020. That was just Curry brand. And to understand kind of how things got to where they are today, you have to start back a little bit, which is that his partnership, when it came together in 2013, this was when Curry was still kind of on the come up. He hadn't really won that string of championships yet that made him like the indisputable like shooting GOAT. And then similarly, Under Armour at that time was really still an up and coming brand. And so this was like two ascendant forces coming together really right as they were about to hit their peak. And you could really argue that like that period between 2013 and let's say 17 or 18 was one of the best sort of athlete signings that any brand has ever been able to pull off. Not only did Curry kind of run the NBA with the rest of the Warriors, but Under Armour basically kind of like got one chance. It signed, one athlete, one superstar athlete, and then, hitched their wagon at the right time and were able to grow as a brand themselves. So it was all kind of a positive story until 2016 or so. That's when the CEO of Under Armour, a guy named Kevin Plank, more or less tacitly kind of endorsed Donald Trump or praised some of his policies during the first presidency. This rubbed a lot of NBA players wrong. It rubbed Curry wrong, although he kept, a pretty diplomatic poise toward it, never like called anything out specifically. But that was a bit of a misstep in the NBA community. And it sort of like led to some bad blood that theoretically was rectified in 2020 with the launch of Curry brand. That was kind of seen as an olive branch. Like, okay, Trump's no longer the president. We're giving you your own brand. Like, let's let bygones be bygones and move on. Then what happens is you effectively have a real failure just in terms of product creation. And I am a sports fan. I would not profess to be an expert in like sneaker culture, which obviously is its own sort of like very specific subculture, but I am familiar and did, kind of read up on some of the expert opinions. The prevailing belief is basically that following 2020, the launch of Curry brand, the shoes that they put out were generally reviled amongst the sneaker community. Specifically, some collaboration put out in 2022 or so that were like widely lampooned across social media as like a really poor iteration of the Curry shoe. So for the last several years, the shoe brand has not done well. It was generating something like $100 million to $120 million in revenue last year, the year before. That is microscopic compared to its peers, maybe even such that it wasn't even a profitable endeavor on a standalone basis. So really from like a retail perspective, a sneaker perspective, an athlete marketing perspective, the partnership was not going well for the last several years. And so that all kind of came to a head last week. Under Armour announced as part of a broader sort of restructuring that they were going to end their relationship with Steph. It was obviously sort of portrayed as a mutual decision, but I think there's a lot of people parsing the tea leaves trying to figure out who instigated this, right? There's nothing publicly available that would say like one party kind of prompted it. I think my read on the situation would be that Under Armour could tell that Steph was unhappy, and Under Armour was looking to basically find cost savings and said, like, let's call a spade in this partnership. You go your separate ways. We get to save however many tens or hundreds of millions of dollars. And we kind of both acknowledged that this wasn't quite a fit. So I think it's a really interesting marketing story because it is effectively a cautionary tale as opposed to the Timothée Chalamet thing that was like, here is a masterclass in marketing. This was, I mean, some of the sneaker analysts I was reading were saying this might be the greatest failed opportunity in the history of athlete shoe collaborations, effectively, because Steph is astronomically famous, and yet his shoe
Yeah.
brand astronomically underperformed, and has now led to this moment where the next big sort of subject of conversation is, who does he sign with next?
Mm-hmm.
He's in sort of the twilight of his career. What are
Yeah.
his considerations? What are the sort of business strategies involved? Some athletes are now going and signing deals with Chinese companies to tap into that market, and they get better margins on the sneakers. So there's all kinds of speculation, but I think that the most interesting thing here is this is like a cautionary tale of how a brand can go wrong in working with an athlete endorsement.
I thought it was more instigated by Curry, who just, was not happy and then realized he wanted to go like somewhere else. But obviously, since he didn't announce that, that means that he didn't have that already ready to go. But the fact that, previous shoe lines have just not been doing well kind of shows that like either Under Armour was not really paying attention to like their end target user who they were going after, or Steph Curry just kind of was giving them more leeway to like figure that out on his behalf as opposed to being a little bit more involved, which fair enough, he's not a shoe designer. Right, like how is he supposed to know that? But he is lending his name to this brand, right? And it does kind of reflect poorly on his brand if his shoes aren't selling that well compared to his peers when he's, one of the most famous basketball stars, even still, right? Like, I think it was the day of or the day after that this was announced, he went and like scored some of the most, 3-pointers that he's ever scored, like in a game ever. So I think it was like him being like, I'm not completely done yet. So good on him for being able to do that. And I'm sure that like other brands are trying to like step up and like, partner with him. The question now is like how good of a deal can he get if he is seen to be on like the sunset of his career. But yeah, I think one of the things that really stood out to me just in general over, about like Under Armour, like Steph Curry one is that it's one of those like partnerships that like when it happened, people were like, what? Like, why would you go like work over there? And I remember like one of the stories being that like when he went to go have the conversation with Nike, they pronounced his name Stephen instead of Stephen Curry. So that like immediately kind of like shut things down there. But then another thing that kind of happened is like I haven't really seen that many more sports stars go and sign with Under Armour, which I thought was very interesting because it's like, are they not using, Steph Curry's limelight to try to bring more, people to him? Or did they just want to focus on him because it costs so much to like create the shoes and like the amount of money that they're losing? The fact that they kept the relationship going so long when it was losing money is like questionable. I think about this too because Shohei Ohtani signed with New Balance, right? We saw for the World Series, he wasn't prominently featured in the Nike commercial because he's not a Nike athlete. And I do wonder if he's going to be able to bring more athletes over to New Balance because I think it helps both brands, right? It helps him because he's able to say, look, we're growing this brand together. And then it helps New Balance because they're growing, they're bringing, more athletes into the fold. Their, star is rising along with, Shohei's. So that's always been something that I found curious about the whole Under Armour deal.
Yeah, I think that you touched on something really interesting. I mean, we're kind of talking about this a lot from the perspective of like a brand or the company or whatever, but I think like this is a more instructive story for like the creator, if you want to call, Steph a creator or Shohei the creator. The potential downside of partnering with a challenger brand is that they might not have the resources or they might not have the track record or they might not have the know-how. And like Steph looked at the situation, saw Under Armour was ascendant, saw that the world of athletic wear was changing. And he said, I would rather be the biggest fish in a small pond than a small fish in a big pond. I'd rather be the sole athlete of an up and coming brand than one in a stable of athletes like you would get at a Nike or an Adidas or whatever the case. And I think that this unfortunately was, I mean, I love that like audacity and that self-belief. But I think this was a case of what can go wrong in that situation, which is that Under Armour dropped the ball. I'm not really shedding any tears for Steph Curry because I think he has plenty of money. But yeah, I know a portion of the contract was paid out in stock of Under Armour, which itself has gone down precipitously since I think its peak of 2020 or so. So this was literally a case of him investing in the company and the company investing in him. And the Steph turned out to be the better investment, than Under Armour did. My takeaways for this are a little bit more business strategy. This is a story about like the athletic wear world shifting dramatically. And it's not just Under Armour that's been left behind, but we've seen Nike has been involved in a massive sort of like reinvention period. And so is Adidas, as they've all been sort of challenged by these new wave of challenger brands, which like Hoka and On and Aloe and et cetera, who are eating into the market share of these longtime incumbents. And I think that like Under Armour most typifies this sort of like head in the sand belief of like, we're going to focus on product and we're going to make the best sweat-proof clothing and the most like ankle supporting sneakers, when like the other brands that have encroached into their space have basically done so by saying, we're plugged into the culture. We're going to be next to the coolest people. We're going to be thinking more brand and a little bit less performance. and have seen that strategy pay dividends for them. And I think you mentioned New Balance. Like, they've had a really phenomenal year. I think we wrote
Mhm.
about it at the top of the year. They've really shifted their marketing spend to, I think, be predominantly influencer marketing. They've brought in a whole new roster of basically very cool athletes
Mhm.
and really kind of like centered them and centered influencer marketing and told brand stories and shied away a little bit from the this is going to help you perform better,
Yeah.
more like this is who you are, this is what the cool people of this moment are wearing, and as a result you should buy it too. And I think, the Under Armour failure is a result of them not really like reading the tea leaves. And unfortunately, I think Steph kind of got dragged down with them in that
Mhm.
regard. So I'm not the kind of guy who's going to be like, well, his sneaker was a flop, so that impacts
Yeah.
his legacy. But there are people out there who say that, and that is kind of a bummer. It does. I like him splitting though, because it does give him sort of
The
another shot.
opportunity, yeah.
And
Yeah. I mean, obviously,
yeah.
one of the most famous case, right, is Michael Jordan, like betting on upstart Nike at the time versus Adidas, and look at what's happened there, right? And then recently, I think that, we've been talking about how Nike has also been shifting their strategy to not be performance based, but to like make it more about the sports ambassadors, right? Like we just saw here when LA won the World Series that they congratulated both the players, but then also the city, and then made the city and Kendrick Lamar and like those cultural touch points be the majority of the campaign, and have it be less about like, oh, they were wearing Nike, like nobody
Hmm.
cares about that. They just want to be involved in like what's cool. And that's also what we were talking about earlier with the Timothée Chalamet thing. It's like you want people to like feel as if they're cool participating in going to see the movie. So great way to like end that segment. Well, cool. I want to talk about Disney. So Disney CEO Bob Iger announced that Disney Plus is soon going to let subscribers create and share short form AI generated content using Disney IP. Um, and I had two thoughts when I first heard this. First, I was like, wait, you're going to let the users do this and not actual creators within Disney create short form content using AI? But then the second thing was, we talked about this a couple weeks ago, where Lionsgate started hiring creators to create fan cam videos to promote movies, TV shows, and they hired them in-house in order to create that content, because they saw that a lot of what the creators were creating was getting a lot more views than what they created in-house. So I'm of two minds here, because as a parent, I'm kind of annoyed that the Disney ecosystem is going to be allowing things that aren't, approved necessarily by like Disney, which makes it even harder for me to trust my kid just going into like Disney Plus and like, poking around by themselves, which is something that I already have to do for YouTube, because they don't make it easy to control what your kid is seeing. And then the other thing is like, this kind of goes back to like us talking last week about how companies sticking, a stake in the sand about how they're treating AI. Is essentially showing, their target customer what they think about them and what they're creating. So last week I said the fact that Coca-Cola was, using AI to create their annual Christmas commercial just kind of signified that, they consider their Coke products and then their customer to essentially like, oh, it's just slop, it's AI slop, it's sugary slop. Whereas Barbour, we had the Wallace and Gromit commercial using claymation that took them 2 years to create. This thing really made it seem as if Barbour cared about their product, it being long lasting. So it kind of puts those two things together. And then Apple creating the glass logo shows that they care more about like the handcraft creation of both their logo, the products that they make, but then also their TV shows and movies. The fact that they're using that as a way to try to attract directors that care about that care about being able to create actual movies instead of using AI, is a way for them to set themselves, apart from the big movie studios that are welcoming AI. I really think it's like a ding against the Disney brand, because they built it based off that hand-drawn animation of all like the movies of Snow White, The Lion King, The Little Mermaid. Obviously, we've started seeing that shift as more and more of their artwork is created digitally. But they still kind of had that Pixar brand to like try to hold them up. So the fact that they're allowing AI to kind of diminish that is questionable to me. Even the creator of the Owl House, she's telling people that they should, give up their Disney Plus subscriptions and then, try to find their show, try to find her show through pirated means, as opposed to watching it on the Disney Plus platform.
I think it's so interesting because I think about this all the time. You see it with ads.
Mhm.
I'm of two minds on this. I'm of the belief that we're going the way of AI and that all of these things are going to, like AI is today what animation was 100 years ago. It's how things are going to be created. It's the future. I'm not mad about companies embracing it. I do think, and the sort of distinction here is, do you want to be like a first mover to embrace it? Is that like what aligns with your brand value? Why? Yeah, that's what I'm almost like, if I'm getting like sort of like tinfoil hat about it, I'm like, is this a message to investors that they're a tech company? Like,
Yeah.
because I'm like, outside of that, it's like, why are you jeopardizing this legacy and reputation of craftsmanship
Mhm.
that you've talked about for some very ill-begotten gains in terms of being able to like let people make things in an app? There's some things you're best off being first to, and there are many things that you're best off being third to. And it's like, let the tech companies be the
Mhm.
ones who rush into AI, because that is very in line with their brands. Or I just was doing a panel the other day where I was talking to the CEO of Tacovas, which is like a Western wear, cowboy boot brand. It's like,
Oh, yeah, yeah.
you don't
Mhm.
want to
Was
be
that
known
AI?
as like, no, no. He was like, we want to
Okay, yeah, because
be,
I was like, that
we
was a
want to
great
be,
commercial. Don't ruin it
yeah,
for me.
yeah. He was like, we want to be one of the last people embracing AI, at least as
Mhm.
it comes to creative. He was like,
Yeah.
we're usually on the back end and all these things. But so I think it's out of step with the Disney brand to lead with AI created ads. But I don't think that like having a product within the Disney Plus ecosystem that allows people to tinker with and do auto generation of whatever, I don't even know, avatars, or I don't know what you create
Yeah.
using it.
I mean, they haven't
I think
quite
that's fun.
said what
And
it's gonna be for.
okay, whenever a company does something that I don't understand, specifically one that creates IP, they're speaking to the 20% of their audience that are super users. But like, I mean, Disney adults are a thing. Disney children are a thing. Like, you
Well,
can
that's
see
what I'm
this having,
saying. I'm like, I would imagine that kids are like super users of Disney Plus,
yeah.
and then now you're making it so their parents can't trust that the content on the platform is gonna be
So you're
safe for
kind of
them to
worried
just
about
watch. Yeah,
yeah,
I
you're
mean,
worried
like,
about almost
I
like the
don't know,
brand
are
safety.
there gonna
Okay.
be, yeah, like, are they gonna have controls so that something, whether it's inappropriate or not, like, because YouTube doesn't quite have that, figured out yet. So like like who's gonna be watching this to make sure that like the content is okay for them, right? Even so, like we're very strict about what our kid can watch on YouTube. Like she can watch long form videos, but she can't watch YouTube shorts because that's like, their attention gets grabbed away. So what
Mm.
sort of content are people going to be creating here that they're going to be allowing? The other thing too is like Disney is very well known for being like huge assholes when it comes to other people using their IP. So this is kind of strange for them to be like, oh sure, you can do it if you use AI to like create this. Why are they doing this like now instead of kind of waiting to see how it rolls out in the future? Because the only thing I can see is if they're trying to more formally compete with Netflix, who very famously uses AI, has said that they're going to be using AI going forward, and they didn't receive nearly as much backlash as Disney. And I think part of that is because Netflix is kind of known as being like, trash TV. Like that's where you go to watch like reality TV, to watch like shows that like the effects aren't that great. It's just kind of like a show to have on the background. It's not like prestige TV anymore, and it's a tech company, right? So it's more allowable for them. But yeah, that'll be like a thing, going forward to kind of, think about. One thing I did want to bring up though is I don't know if you saw, but maybe it was ChatGPT, like when they first launched their video, a couple of the videos that went viral on were the like the AI videos of stormtroopers like showing the day in the life, right? Where it's like you had
That's
them
right.
showing that they were like pissed off that they were like in a new world, or like, that they were getting attacked by like Ewoks. And it was like the behind the scenes cameras of like the soldiers, taking them around. And I thought that that was like a really interesting way of like showing a different aspect to the IP. So maybe that's like something that'll get created, because I thought that was like a really innovative idea of like using Disney IP and like a new thing that we hadn't seen before. If that's
Mm,
the level that we're going to be creating Disney AI IP here, then like maybe that's acceptable. But I don't have high hopes for like the majority of what's going to
yeah.
be created to
Well,
be at that level.
yeah, the next Star Wars film is going to be made by like some 16-year-old in a basement
Yeah, exactly.
using AI tools. I guess we're joking, but that's probably the future. But I
Hmm.
mean, I was just going to say, like, on that note, I think sometimes I have to remind myself also of like one of the greatest innovations of the digital era from a social media perspective is user generated content. You know what I mean?
Hmm.
Like
Yeah.
I hate admitting that, but it's effectively like, what if we outsource the production of labor
Hmm.
to the people who use the products, and then we get to monetize the time they spend doing that? You know what I
Hmm.
mean? It's like a three birds, one stone situation for social media companies. And I think Disney on some level is saying, hey, let's put this stuff out there. It already exists. We already have
Hmm.
super users who love it. I mean, you noted, I think maybe like a little derisively, like, is this just like, an engagement play, like on some level?
Hmm.
And it's like, oh, absolutely. Like they now create another way for people to spend time on their platform, for them to develop a deeper affinity for their IP. And Disney doesn't have to really lift a finger. I mean, maybe there's some associated costs, obviously, with the AI technology itself, but
Hmm.
this is effectively a way for them to keep people engaged without having to produce very expensive original programming.
Hmm.
And to your point, maybe they're using it as a sandbox on some
Right.
level. Like if some concept becomes incredibly viral, that's just taking data about what people like, and then they can run with it, and they already have like a pre-baked idea. So your concerns as a parent are legitimate, and I know so much of Disney's audience is children and parents and families, and so I would hope that they're taking your feedback seriously, because I would imagine other people are thinking the same thing. But taking this sort of like cynical tech perspective, it's like, it's a low lift, potentially high reward way of getting people to engage more with their IP. So I can see why they do it.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, so those would be a couple lessons for me, is that, timing is brand positioning. So the fact that they are doing this early, without being clear about what it means or how people are actually going to be able to use it, I think was a miss for me. Where it's like, if they do want to, create this like user generated content, such a valid way of like doing it, but say like, hey, we're going to allow people to use our IP and do fan cams, but they have to do it within our platform. Like, I think that that makes sense. That would be like, okay, yeah, I think, it's more like personal use. People get to do that. But say that instead of just, kind of putting out there, "Oh, Disney's going to use AI," Um, and then another thing too is that they really are going to have to battle between their Disney IP and then slop what's being created on their platform on their behalf. Like some of it is obviously going to make their way out. So that's something that they should definitely keep an eye out for, because they don't want the Disney brand to be lowered because all these other things are happening that they've allowed their consumer to use.
It's true. Final point here. I mean, thank you for letting me like riff on this a little bit. This is more
Yeah.
just related to, this is a story that I wrote last week. There's so much going on with YouTube. There's like a million ways to get into it. I think what's been in the headlines is the carriage dispute between the aforementioned Disney
Hmm.
and YouTube TV, but that's just one of the many stools that make up YouTube's business. And what I kind of came to report on is really from, putting my hat on as a media reporter, is this idea that YouTube is going to be, or already is, the next incubator for new media companies. And I kind of say this seeing a handful of really innovative media companies coming from the platform, especially those started by entrepreneurs or creators who have moved to YouTube from traditional legacy outlets. You have people like Taylor Lorenz, Tara Palmieri, who came from Puck, Dave Jorgensen, who came from the Washington Post, all have essentially moved their home base to make YouTube their home page kind of thing. And then you have another company called Dynamo, started by the former editor-in-chief of Business Insider, a guy named Nicholas Carlson. At that company for 15 years, what does he do as soon as he starts to set up his own shop? He launches a YouTube-centric media company. So you have like indications that that is the new arena to which talent is flocking. There's a lot of other reasons that are making YouTube the most hospitable place to start new media companies. We're seeing a real sea change in the ease with which somebody can produce video is simpler than ever. Video is more abundant than ever. Social media platforms prioritize video like crazy. YouTube, as a result, is a very natural sort of, headquarters for a media company in the video age. We also have other factors like the open internet is continuing to be sort of under assault from answer engines that are no longer sending traffic to websites. So publishers that had previously treated websites as kind of their homepage are now starting to pivot and say, okay, we'll have bigger presences on apps, we'll have bigger presences in walled gardens like YouTube, etc. And then in addition to that, in the sort of social media space, you have a lot of different competitors for the throne there. But YouTube is really the only one, a lot of creators tell me, that solves for both monetization and distribution. You get great distribution in places like TikTok and Reels, but you don't get a consistent audience because the algorithm really controls what content surfaces. So you don't really ever get to develop that relationship. And additionally, when you do have viewership, you don't monetize it as well as you do on YouTube, where every creator gets a split of ad revenue, and in fact has a new product coming out early next year, dynamic brand insertion, I think it's called, which is basically going to kind of rewrite the rules of like video sponsorship, which used to be something that you did once and it got baked into a video forever. Now you're going to be able to set quotas on that and say a brand sponsors this video for 500,000 views. And then after that, we get to resell sponsorship. So not only does it basically turn sponsorship into something that has finitude that can be bought and sold for a specific amount of time and then bought and sold again, but it also unlocks the whole backlog of all these creators who maybe sold a sponsorship to a video 5 years ago. That video's done 10 million views, but they've never made a cent more off that sponsorship. Now they get to re-up all those things. So monetization on YouTube is about to turn a really big corner there. The last point, it's also where people watch TV. I mean, talk about like its comparison to Disney. YouTube is the most streamed television channel, in addition to one of the most popular forms of short form content and of course traditional long form video. So if you're a creator and you're creating on YouTube, you're reaching people on the phone, you're reaching them on the laptop and their desktop, and you're reaching them on their television where CPMs are highest. So this all creates this massive flywheel of we're living in the video era. The video HQ is YouTube. The open web is declining. If you're looking to start a media company, there's no better place to do it than YouTube. I think from a marketing perspective, you really start to think, how are we incorporating YouTube into our strategy? How are we working with YouTube creators? How are we taking advantage of these new sponsorship options, et cetera? I think it really opens up a window of new possibilities for what YouTube is and can become, as it, I think, increasingly sort of like nips at the heels of original content programmers like Netflix and Disney. I think you're already seeing a bunch of people spend more time on YouTube. I think that process is just going to accelerate. My big question is, when does YouTube start creating original content? YouTube's had an amazing year and is really sort of like sort of determining the zeitgeist in many ways.
Yeah, so that's why I wanted you to talk about it, just because we talk about YouTube a lot here, just how things have changed, how YouTube is doing so much better versus Google in terms of, search results, that everything is shifting towards video. So I thought it was like super interesting that, you came up with this thesis and like wrote about it, because that's been one of the decisions that we made when I created, the podcast, or when I was, talking to Amanda about it, was that we knew it had to be like a video podcast. And then part of the strategy to grow it is put it up on YouTube, but then also doing YouTube Shorts. And then YouTube Shorts is like where we get most of, the views. We've gone viral on TikTok, but that's obviously more, chaotic. You can't like tell what's going to happen, right? YouTube has a really great way of getting the videos that are going to do well to kind of spread far and wide.
Mm.
So whatever it is that they're doing with their algorithm like really works. So it's been like very interesting to kind of dive deeper into YouTube, because prior to this, I hadn't really had to. It was just always like, well, we're not, on video, we're not creating ads. But it is something that now when I work with clients, I suggest a little bit more like, hey, if you are going to be creating content, create stuff for YouTube so that people can also find out about you there, because a lot more people are defaulting to watching YouTube rather than watching TV, which is a super interesting way of like seeing how consumption has changed. It's no longer that people are going to be like reading newsletters or reading Twitter. It's like most of them are going to be on YouTube. Um, and that's been like, something amazing to see that YouTube has been able to kind of adapt because, of the whole TikTok, boondoggle that was happening with like the Trump administration of like whether it was going to shut down or not. You had a lot of creators have to like think about, well, if TikTok is going to shut down, where do I go? And YouTube made it very easy for them to, come on over, bring all their content, and then made it so that their monetization, like how they were going to get paid, was better than what they were doing on TikTok. I've talked to a lot of creators that were like, I've just stopped doing TikTok because they don't pay out as well as YouTube. So their,
Hmm.
formats have completely changed so that they could be on YouTube. So that's another thing that like YouTube is doing really well in order to like keep creators. And then to your point about bringing, whether they're going to be creating TV shows, like it'd be very easy for them to like get like the top 20 creators that they have on their platform and then bring them onto, and create some sort of station. We just saw that The Ringer on Spotify made a deal with Netflix in order to put all their podcasts on Netflix, which is, interesting because it's like when they first did the transition over to like, hey, we're doing all our podcasts on video, people were like, well, why? I mean, people mostly listen to them. And it's like they saw like the tea leaves that like video is like where things are going. So they had all their podcast hosts. And it's funny because some of them have been complaining saying like, we're on video now all the time. I have to like think about what I look like and what I'm wearing. But now it's paid out to this, right? Where it's like now they have this partnership with Netflix. I thought it was such an interesting, but then also brilliant idea, because it's like what I said earlier was like Netflix has become this channel where it's like you kind of just have it on the background, right? So if
Hmm.
I'm gonna like watch something, I might as well just watch the podcast that I like and listen to,
Yeah.
and just have it on in the background. It's not something that I have to be paying attention to, which is exactly what Netflix is for now, right? Like it's not
Yeah.
a place that you go to pay attention to TV shows, right? It's like something that you have in the background,
I
and they
can I
know
can just
that, right?
yeah. I can see like the CEO
Go ahead.
like wincing as you say that, but everybody agrees, right? Like, I mean, like
Like, but
we're sort of like I feel like I should start by saying with YouTube, like its primary selling point is that it's free, right? Like unlike any other streaming service, it's free, so it has this massive audience, and I see more and more creators say, we're in, forget SEO as the open web is falling apart. We're going to treat YouTube as our top of funnel, and we're going to
mhm,
put stuff here. We're going to find new audiences, and then the 10% of those audiences that love us, we're going to funnel them from YouTube down to Substack or Patreon or
mhm,
wherever we can like then paywall that sort of hyper user even
mhm,
more. And then finally, to your point, I always am singing the praises of YouTube, and I keep forgetting this massive thing, which is podcasting, which is effectively like an entirely adjacent category as of 3 years ago that now it's effectively eaten.
mhm.
And it's changed the game for media companies. It's changed the game for podcasters. It's changed the game. I mean, Spotify all of a sudden is sort of been on its back foot trying to catch up. That's why it's obviously signing these deals with places like The Ringer. So I feel like it has just totally reinvented or sort of reshaped the landscape in a serious way. And I think it's absolutely a platform to watch over the next year.
Yeah, definitely. Well, thank you so much for bringing the story. So we're gonna move on to takeaways. For the Timothy Chalamet, the takeaway for me is that meta marketing only works when you're likable enough to get away with it, which that's what Timothy Chalamet is capitalizing on, the fact that it's so absurd and so weird, but then using that self-awareness of his current brand to mock the promotional machine that he's using to promote his movie. I don't think it's going to work for everybody, but I do think that it is going to change how movies are promoted going forward. And he's the one that's like starting that. So, keep an eye on how, movies are getting promoted in the future, and know that like Timothy kind of changed this.
Yeah, I think sort of like blurring the lines between what's the product, what's the promotion, and what's the person involved, it ends up creating like a universe rather than just a discrete thing to sell. And I think a universe offers far more opportunity for engagement. But to your point, I think it also kind of heightens the key man risk here. Like, so long as Timothy remains beloved, this is a brilliant strategy, but show me an actor that's remained beloved their entire
Mhm,
career. I mean, maybe Tom Hanks or something, you know what I mean? But like,
mhm.
you're betting on a horse, and that only works so long as the horse wins, kind of thing. But
Yeah.
I think in
Actually,
this moment
one
it's
one more
it's
point
brilliant.
I want to add to that is that he and A24 have recognized that people want to experience experiences. And so the fact that they're making it memeable to make it an experience is like the brilliant strategy behind this as well. That it's not just, him putting his, brand out there and his aura. It's about like, let's make the Marty Supreme movie an experience that people want to engage with because, the promotional tour is so, chaotic and crazy that they just want to be a part of it. So that's another thing to think about as well. It's like, can you create some sort of like aura or
Mhm.
experience in order to get people to want to participate? We've kind of seen that with like the NYC pop-ups of Anthropic, and Meta just launched one yesterday with like their blue building. So pop-ups and experiential marketing are on the rise.
Very much so. And then, okay, with Under Armour, my sort of takeaway is, as I sort of mentioned above, which is effectively that sports and athletic wear have shifted drastically over the last decade. Under Armour kind of failed to see that and respond. And unfortunately, that was sort of the poison pill in their relationship with Steph Curry. So I think it's like keeping and maintaining a really strong brand identity, and being really, I mean, people say this all the time, but like being at the center of culture,
Yeah.
so important when you are a sports brand. Sports is in many ways a really critical part of culture. And I think Under Armour kind of took its eye off the ball and focused too much on performance, not enough on the Under Armour brand, the Curry brand, and tie-ins to Curry himself. And I think the end result of that is squandering one of the best sort of athlete endorsement opportunities in this century, really.
Yeah, I think the biggest takeaway for me was that Under Armour thought they were selling shoes instead of realizing that they were selling a brand identity, and that's, Steph Curry's brand identity, but then also the type of athlete that would wear this, or the type of person that would wear this. They lost cultural relevance because they stopped paying attention. And until they like turn that around, I don't think that they're going to be able to like figure that out. We've seen Nike be able to figure that out and start tying it more to like the actual consumer, the actual sports stars that are like wearing Nike. And I think that that's more important going forward, that it's not about the brand themselves, but it's like how you're tying yourself to this cultural identity that you identify with, but then also that your target consumer identifies with. For the Disney AI story, it's them having to figure out how they can have the user generated content that they want, and that elevates the brand. We saw that with Lionsgate, right? It was like they were able to do it by bringing the creators in house, not necessarily just like randos that like were creating content in general. And then also, if they are going to be a little bit more lax with their IP, that should happen across the board, and have it so that people can share that out there, and not just have it within their own like platform, because otherwise then it just creates a closed ecosystem where there isn't that like, trust being created. And then as a parent, I really hope that they have some sort of way to keep track of like what's being created on their behalf on their platform, so that I don't have to worry that like my kid is going to see something that they shouldn't.
Mhm. Yeah, and I mean, I'm maybe a little bit more permissive here in that I think it's, from a sort of strategic perspective, an understandable low lift kind of trial balloon. I do think, of course, to your point, they have to remain conscientious of the fact that their primary audiences are parents and families and children. And so brand safety and making sure that they have those tools in place is absolutely critical. But I am pretty supportive and understand the vision of Disney wanting to be an innovator in content creation, which, Walt Disney might have used like a pen and a pencil, but I think the engineers of today are using AI to sort of push that boundary. And I think that that's really smart. But I do think that when it comes to their marketing, Disney is sort of a beloved legacy brand, and I mean that in the good sense, and that they risk jeopardizing that when they lean a little too quickly into using AI to promote their brand or to do advertising or whatever the case is. So I think that this might be one of those cases where being a first mover with a new technology might not make as much sense for Disney as it does for Netflix.
Mm-hmm.
And then finally with YouTube, my main takeaway is, what are we going to see next year? What's on the horizon? I feel like it's becoming the center of the universe. It's the most hospitable place to be a creator. It has the best ad payouts, the best distribution. It's eating audio. The open web is crumbling and funneling into it. Who's going to stop YouTube? I guess Google survived, like the antitrust scrutiny earlier this year that was considering decoupling YouTube from Google, so it sort of dodged that bullet as well. My big question is, when does original programming sort of begin to enter the platform? The big criticism of YouTube is that creators get big there and then they graduate and go to Netflix. What will the platform do to incentivize its biggest players to remain on the platform outside of the occasional Mr. Beast or whatever? Taking that next step, I think, is going to be an exciting development for the platform.
Yeah. And then my main takeaway is for marketers, learn YouTube. If you are going to be creating content, you should be looking at it as a channel that you take seriously now. Like I said, people aren't reading as much content. So if you're creating blogs, is there a way that you can use that to create video content using the CEO or using people inside the company that are willing to be on camera? But yeah, the biggest thing is like marketers need to figure out YouTube, how to get on it, how to use it, how to figure out how to get sponsorship deals, how to give sponsorship, to creators that are, in your world or your realm. And yeah, figure that out quick because everything seems to be moving in that direction, including where most of your target audience is, since that's where they're watching a lot of videos and where they spend their time. Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mark, for joining today. Where can people find you?
You can follow me on Instagram at markstenberg3, or you can follow my reporting at Adweek, and I have a once weekly media newsletter called On Background. Comes out every Wednesday evening. You can find the signups all over my socials and on the Adweek website.
Awesome. And then you can follow me at Sonia Bishes everywhere, and then the podcast at Meme Team Pod on YouTube, and then Meme Team Podcast on Spotify and TikTok. Thank you.